Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and I'm here with Michael, right across from the spooky, what is this, Graceland Cemetery? Is that what's over here?
Graceland? Probably not Graceland.
No, I think that's what it's called. I'm
Really?
not even kidding. I don't know. We record across from a giant cemetery. It's the big one, right?
It's the big one. Yeah.
The
It's
big,
like 12
spooky
city block.
Yeah, right.
The one where you go on Google Maps and you say, "Oh yeah, they have Grant Park and Millennium Park. Oh, what's that park? Oh, that's just dead people underground."
Yep. So this is where we bury all the people that don't make it out of Chicago. You're listening to Double Feature, and we have a show about, well, there's some dying on the show today. What movies are we doing?
We're doing Rogue and the Innkeepers.
Someone dies in one of the films. You know, by by last year's year-end finale episode, if anyone made it all the way through that train wreck, you would probably have considered that a spoiler just now.
Yeah, well,
you
I
were
would also
spoiling films for
you
people.
just spoiled a film by saying somebody dies in one of the
You
films.
can use chapters to skip this chapter. There's some chapters in one of the films too, and we're going to spoil which film has chapters in it. Use the chapters in our show to skip the spoiler about those chapters.
Okay. Rogue is not a film necessarily conducive to a graveyard. It's more conducive to an Australian outback island in a river canyon.
Well,
but we don't record next to one of those.
No, we don't have any of that here. I don't think we have one of those words here. What was that? Outback
Australian
island,
outback island in a river canyon.
River canyon. We have a river.
We do have a river.
We have a river.
Forks.
Yeah, but you can't bury people in the river the way you can just leave them in the swamp. That's an okay burial, to just leave someone in a swamp or a crocodile cave. Also, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. Why don't you just go ahead and type up an email that says you called them alligators instead of crocodiles?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that's going to happen at some point. So might as well get that ready now.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that my incessant need to be a little bit loquacious and verbose when I'm speaking.
Ooh, look at you.
Is going to cause me to say alligator just because of how often I've said and heard crocodile throughout
you need
this
some
show.
variation.
And
sure.
I don't want to say reptile or lizard or newt or giant gecko.
I, on the other hand, am going to only say giant gecko for the remainder of this, just of this chapter. When we talk about the crocodiles and the innkeepers, I'll go back to crocodile.
So Rogue is directed by Greg McLean.
Yeah.
Who we covered on the show with John Jarrett's other film.
Yeah.
Which
John Jarrett's other, that's an interesting way to look at that, but sure.
Which is Wolf Creek. And he's probably the only director that I can really, director whose films make it in America. I'm sure there are Australian directors that make films about and in Australia that we never see.
You're baiting people again, man. They're going to start telling us to watch that Mel Gibson movie with all the sand.
Braveheart?
I don't know what to do with you sometimes. I just don't know what to do with you.
Similar to Neil Marshall. They hit in the U.S., at least with the horror community, and maybe it's because they're horror films. The U.S. has a ridiculous horror community. Yeah. It's just insane. Yeah, all of us horror fans are weird, and we latch on.
I think is what you mean.
Yeah, we latch on. I think one of the greatest things that Dimension Film ever did was create Dimension Extreme, just exclusively because posters and DVD covers and the covers that go on iTunes have that red gash across the top that to me just means violent movie. Love it.
Buy this film.
Yeah.
I talked about this at some point, I think, on the show.
Probably
that I had
back with maybe Inside
Dimension Extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was iTunes at some point in the last year or so. It might have been longer now. They put movies in the cloud, which I got really excited about because I love the idea that I don't have to be responsible for keeping all of my movies, that they can just sit on a server somewhere and I can go to anyone's house and download a film I own.
Sure.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So at the time, only certain labels, production company, whatever.
Studios.
Movie houses. Yeah, studios, thank you.
DVD banks.
Were putting their movies in the cloud. And so I was kind of going through the 200 or whatever films that I have and figuring out which studios made which films. And Dimension makes 85% of my films or something. But Dimension Extreme makes a lot of those films too. Which is just branding, right?
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah. And Rogue is weird as a Splat Pack film because we've covered Bowsman with Saw. and we've covered Rob Zombie and Neil Marshall.
Well, we've covered all these guys at least a little bit.
Sure.
Right?
It's always people killing people.
Yeah, right.
Always. People killing people.
Yeah.
And here we have a giant, what was it, steam train sized crocodile, a massive gecko.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
And
18-wheeler size, would
that's
you
what
say?
I kept saying it was the size of an 18-wheeler.
It's huge, Michael. So tell me about the crocodile as the slasher then.
So I'm glad that's the way you worded it, because that's something I want to talk about.
On this show, I can anything as the slasher is basically my MO. That's my elevator pitch for any film.
Sure.
I used to be bad at elevator pitches. Then I realized I can use the template blank as the slasher. And just name the thing that appears the most in the movie.
So Rogue is about I guess the title refers to the fact that it's a rogue crocodile. It's gone crazy.
Sure.
I mean, it's not behaving in the way that they said it would.
Yeah.
Or rather, they expected it to.
Sure.
It's hyper-territorial. Although, as the film goes on, they just kind of explain how it's behavioral.
Right.
Why it's hunting them, and, it's marked us as a food source, stuff like that. But it's massive, and possibly the most notable thing in the sense of double feature, the podcast. This is a podcast.
Yeah, this is a podcast. You got it.
Is that it's a giant CG crocodile, and it doesn't make me angry.
Yeah, both of those are true. Impressive CG crocodile.
Yeah,
I mean, my
really
standards
is.
for CG, I always try to keep them ridiculously low. But fine job.
That's
on
some
the crocodile.
optimistic pessimism you've got going on there.
I was wondering how long it would take you to invoke your new favorite idea ever.
But the other thing about the phrase giant crocodile as the slasher is that...
Oh, what does our show come to?
is that saying... So this as a Splat Pack film is also notable because of one, who dies, and because of how few of them die.
Sam Worthington is in this movie.
Avatar's Sam Worthington.
Well, okay,
or Clash of the Titans, Sam Worthington.
So really quick before Worthington's star power just massacres everybody else in this movie.
So you're saying Sam Worthington's star power as the slasher now?
Yeah, that's exactly what that is. Kate's fantastic, and I'm gonna be all sad about her all over the show. But also, Michael Vartan is in this movie. And I'm so glad we live in an era where we have IMDb.
Yeah.
Because we actually had to stop the movie and figure out what he was from. Otherwise, it would have, in a world before IMDb, I would have spent an hour and 20 minutes trying to figure out where I know him
Calling your
from.
friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen Rogue? What was that guy in?
Well, the conversation would have gone, have you seen Rogue?
No.
Okay, well, he's that one guy. He has that kind of look on his... He's in all those
He's
movies
got a
or maybe
longish face.
TV or something.
Right, but what is he from?
Alias is the thing. Well, this is something about... You and I mentioned TV every once in a while that we don't watch. Speaking of Splat Pack, Adam Green has a show.
Also, Rob Zombie.
Apparently Rob Zombie, too. Just Google their shows. Fantastic.
Adam Green,
TV, yeah. So,
not Splat Pack, by the way.
Should be Splat Pack. I watched all of Alias. It's 5 or 6 seasons or something. So hundreds of hours watching Alias. And I forgot that that's what he's from. That's about how much TV goes in and out of my life. But one of the main characters in Alias.
Sure.
And has done, other film work too.
Alias being a J.J. Abrams, so we're allowed to watch that TV show.
TV show, yeah.
And then, so you mentioned Rhoda Mitchell, who plays Kate, and she was on our show as the same character twice in the same film before on year one. Melinda and Melinda is the point I'm trying to make.
Yes. Where I believe we really talked her up on that that episode too.
She played Melinda in Melinda and Melinda.
Thank you for that.
And then finally we have the slaughterhouse star power of Sam Worthington.
Yeah, what? That's a career that could have gone much differently.
Yeah. So Sam Worthington plays this hillbilly backwoods Bodie poacher man.
What are you talking about? This is nuts. It's true. I mean, you're right.
Okay, I was like, am I wrong?
No, it's just a weird fucking role for him. It really is. Bizarre.
Well, and I think the weirdest part is how quickly he gets et.
The way they lead into the violence in this film is one of my favorite parts about it. We start out, nature footage. Yeah. Right? We're doing the same kind of thing in Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek, I feel like, was a little more subtle about it because they weren't exploiting it as hard. Look at these vast open landscapes and wide shots and so forth. But Rogue is literally, you have to realize you're surrounded by the swamp.
Yeah.
And there's a thing in the swamp.
It's about the dangers of the purity of the Australian outback.
Right.
It's a portrait of exactly why you don't want to go out to those beautiful exotic places.
Yeah, exactly.
Complete with other tourists. Great reason not to go to those exotic places.
Yeah, but it doesn't start so bad. We have a unassuming boat ride. It's the music, Michael. It's almost a lazy Sunday film, I think. The music makes it a little lazy Sunday. Does. That and the fact that humans are not our killers seems to also be a theme.
I'm also going to go with blistering sunlight and flies on everyone's face. But I'm only allowed to mention that one time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And they're on a tour boat, and this whole beginning section isn't just hanging out, getting nothing accomplished.
Right.
It's an excuse for exposition.
Sure.
So in our collection of wonderful devices for exposition, being on a tour boat is probably one of the best. It's literally, you're on a boat to learn about your killer. So here's some fun facts about crocodiles.
Basically, what it is,
a lot in a short period.
Is it's a bullet list and a profile of all the shit they're going to have to figure out how to deal with when faced with a giant crocodile. Although I think in the next film, when we get to the Innkeepers, it has my favorite exposition gimmick.
One chapter at a time, sir. You don't know what's relevant is kind of the thing I really like about that exposition.
Sure.
Is you're getting all of these facts. And some of them they're going to check back in and you're going to go, crocodiles love eating dead turkeys. So that's important. And some of them will be completely irrelevant.
The one that I remember seeing and immediately going, that's going to be the thing they're going to have trouble with.
Sure.
Is crocodiles will watch you and figure out your habit. That doesn't come back.
No.
It does. Well, they're in the water for about 6 hours.
Yeah, you're right. The crocodiles really don't watch them and figure out anything.
I think what he figures out is you're stuck there and you fit in my mouth.
In fact, I don't know if any of those bullet points are relevant now that I think about it.
Well, there's the one about how crocodigators can leap up out of the water and eat people off of a rope.
Part of that is probably, it's red herrings, but if you want to go back to the title of Rogue, and if Double Feature has taught me anything over the years, it's never try and explain what the title means because, again, emails, so many emails. In your previous thesis of the crocodile being the rogue element here, none of the bullet points matter because it doesn't follow the rules.
Part of it seems like a joke, a little tongue-in-cheek jab.
Did you just say tongue-in-teeth?
Yeah, I
did. That's good.
It's this idea that, look at the cunning and dangers of nature's perfect killer of evolution. I mean, this is a dinosaur and it's evolved to be the perfect, most fierce hunter. And you're sitting there going, oh, it's got all these techniques and it'll watch you and it'll learn. But what you're not thinking...
the raptors in Jurassic Park.
But what you're not thinking is, or it could just be the size of a blimp and it doesn't matter how it kills you because you can't stop it.
Yeah, we don't need any of these bullet points. They're irrelevant. It's just huge and it has a very large mouth.
Right.
And you're all scared.
And it uses that large mouth to kill off not only unsuspecting characters, but kills off characters that an unsuspecting audience is surprised to see go.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's part of the surprises. I mean, it's the same thing with, we're setting up all these bullet points. Which ones, are we going to use? Pleasantly surprised in whatever it picks out. Keeps the audience guessing. Same thing with the characters that die.
Right, well, and it starts so sneaky, too. Your initial reaction is, here comes sneaky spy croc.
Yeah, right.
Because it seems like it almost slurps the John Wayne character. It slurps him from the beach. Just kind of, they turn around and he's just a ripple in the water.
Yep, don't need him anymore.
And you think to yourself, oh, he's a super spy crocodile.
He could have just as easily swam away, John Wayne. He's just like, fuck this, I'm bailing. Well, then you lose Sam Worthington's character, probably the last person you think it's going to come down to. I love that they set him up as the asshole character, and then, that's usually the character you have to endure through the whole film. Don't know why movies do that. And, his character has more to him. I would have hung out with him the whole movie. That's okay. But a lot of times, the two assholes who come over in the boat, you have to suffer through them for an hour before they get eaten. Because movies want to make you suffer.
Just dessert, yeah.
As if it somehow makes it better because you waited longer. But I think it would be so much better if they're assholes and then they turn around and get eaten. And we're just done with that mechanic. But that happens, and then Kate fucking gets attacked.
Yeah,
I could not believe that.
She gets the old crocodile water roll.
Well, it's in one of those scenes, too, where you go, well, this can't happen. It's one of the main characters. You look at your watch. And you go, well, we have 40 minutes left, so Kate's not going to get eaten. That can't happen. Just viciously comes out of the water and destroys her.
It's insane. And then you're left with the American guy, and you're thinking, I mean, at this point, they just send the rest of the tour group off to find help.
Yeah, right.
And you're just wondering what the film is going to entail now, because in a group, in a party of, 10, you can see that feasibly they can come up with some system to kill a 9,000-pound, 7-meter-long giant gecko.
They all kick it. Everyone just chips
repeated
in. And,
kicking.
Yeah, right.
But once it's down to one man and one beast, and an outsider, nonetheless, your brain goes away from the possibility of him killing the crocodile. And instead is just, how is he going to get away?
Well, and the last thing you think is another character is going to pop up again because you get Kate back.
Right.
It's
kind of. You get the dog back.
Sure. All right. I think just because they killed Sam's character off, you believe Kate's character is gone.
Right.
You see the whole tour troupe leave, and you just go, well, those characters are really gone now. They did it with Sam. They're going to do it with everybody. You think the movie's really sticking to its guns in that, and it's another way that it surprises you. It's really all the misnomers in this film that are really pleasing. It's we have that strange focus on the why is it doing this element, guessing the crocodile's motivation. Everybody sticks on that throughout the film. It keeps coming back up in such a way where you kind of feel like, oh, it can't just be an asshole crocodile. It has to have some... There's a greater, we peed on its Indian burial ground or something, you know what I mean?
It's genetically engineered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why is it so big, Michael? And it's so angry. And in the end, we don't know. Maybe it's just big and angry. That's
big
probably it.
And angry, and it can't bite through rocks.
Yeah. So we never really come back to that because not important. The things the characters guess don't happen to be the point of the film.
Right.
It's just a bunch of crazy, terrified people going, why is this happening to us? But in a movie where you don't have, there's no supernatural killer, there's no personified killer, you're not anthropomorphizing the crocodile.
Right.
This isn't.
You don't get any sneaky looks. Just there's no reaction shots from the crocodile. From the crocodile.
Exactly. Instead, you have these scenes like the rope scene where the characters basically make their own problems.
Right.
Their situation becomes worse because of, they're their own worst enemy. It goes back to a lot of the more well-done monster films in the history of double feature.
Sure.
The kind of Cloverfield movies or The Thing or any of these movies where, that's one way when you're dealing with an abstract kind of concept as a killer. It's some of the more, let's say, highbrow moments of Final Destination, where people start to question each other or motives come into play. Because we have a killer, we can't just all get pissed at it and suit up and go attack it.
Sure.
So, it turns these characters in on themselves. That lets you play with the personalities of your characters a little bit more. It lets you get to know them without them having to sit down and explain their backstories to one another.
Well, and the other thing that it results in is there's never an enduring hatred for the thing that's killing them.
Right.
You never hate it. You just intrepidly fear it because you know that it's just going to keep trying to eat them. It has no reason. It has no rationale.
Right.
But at the same time, it's technically not doing anything wrong.
Sure.
So you can't hate it. There's no... it's almost the wrong word to call it an enemy. It's just the antagonist, it
happens to be your foe in this case.
Yeah, it's just the negative force.
Right. There isn't a character on the boat whose family was killed by the crocodile 20 years ago and has come on this tour purely for revenge.
Sure. Unless that was what John Jarrett's thing was all about.
Right. Oh, I was going to say John Wayne before he swam away. That was actually his motivation, and then he bailed. I'm sticking to him swimming away because I think it's far funnier, so I'm going to pretend that's what happens. The last thing that I wanted to mention loving in this film is so weird I don't even really know how to talk about it. But it's the trigonometry of the death at the end.
Yeah.
Now you kind of know what I'm talking about, right?
Sure.
The way that this spear death, I guess I can just say I like the spear death, and that's fine. But if I'm really going to get down to what I like about it, it's part of the setup and the aesthetics. And, our character leans against this giant fucking triangle. And the crocodile's mouth is shaped like a triangle, and the one triangle opens into the base of the other triangles, and then he hits him with a spear, which is also I guess, another triangle.
Sure.
It's not even so much, isn't it funny, there's a bunch of triangles they're using
that's
in
not
this.
at all what you're saying.
If you were in charge of storyboarding this scene, and just to amuse yourself, you said, I'm going to make a finale climax just out of triangles. Like that's, I mean, that is funny. I do like that. I'm not going to pretend I don't. But the way that all of these shapes kind of line up in such a way that he is spared because he's caught in the open gap between the two triangles. Right. And then he spears him through the fucking face. I said him, it. He spears it, Michael, not anthropomorphizing the crocodile. Right. Not going to happen. Spears it and kills it. And that's, I mean, that is the death, right? Yeah. There's no rules of the slasher.
Sure. Well, again, it's not a slasher. It's just a giant alligator.
It's not a slasher. I was wrong the whole time. My elevator pitch has failed. And furthermore, to make this the antithesis of slasher films, their survivor group, so humorously named, actually survives. They all survive in the end. The director who did The Innkeepers is also a very familiar name on our show.
But he's not a Splat Pack director, and that's one of the reasons that we paired him up.
Sure.
This is, I mean, there are a handful of directors that you and I would probably both say deserve to be brought to the Wikipedia page of Splat Pack.
Sure.
Adam Green, we already mentioned.
Yeah.
Probably the utmost necessary addition to the Splat Pack team. And right behind him is Ty West.
Yeah, this is, I mean, if you really want to get to the core of this double feature, I think it's names we throw out amongst all these other names that don't actually make the same film.
Sure.
And we just talked about Rogue and how it takes a lot of, really just kind of a surprising direction to a lot of things, probably unintentionally. Sure. Just making its own film. The Innkeepers does the same thing, I feel like maybe even more deliberately, takes a lot of choices to move in directions that we don't anticipate.
Sure. Or to move in directions that we do anticipate and prove that it can still be done well, even though a certain track is jaded or overdone.
Sure, when it becomes a cliche. It can even do the cliches well. Well, that's one of the things about Ty West. It's a director you and I have been incredibly curious about figuring out because of the two films of his we've done are the incredibly artful The House of the Devil.
Right, and the goofy, campy, fucking...
Awesome, though.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely amazing, but the Cabin Fever sequel.
Yeah, right. And so in reading more and more about this guy, and he came to the Music Box not too long ago, and I didn't go because I fucked up. I should have gone and seen... Did you see him talk when he came?
No, I was going to go, and then nobody would go with me.
Fail. See, this is what happens. God damn it. If only there were somebody who would come to Chicago and explain Ty West to us.
Right.
It might be Ty West. Damn it. Sorry, Ty West. We missed you. Come back. Apparently, he disowned Cabin Fever 2.
Right, which just adds to the
mystery, right?
Well, yeah, and the elegy of the kind of movies he wants to be making.
Sure.
Because I loved Cabin Fever 2, and I didn't think it was a bad movie at all, but I did definitely note that it was grossly different from House of the Devil. And Innkeepers is far more in line with House of the Devil than it is. But it still has the humor element that House of the Devil was entirely lacking.
And that Cabin Fever definitely had. Definitely had. So it falls somewhere between these 2 points we've now made on the line. This is just apparently a college math course of an episode of Double Feature. But if we imagine these 2 points on a line, it falls somewhere closer, I guess, to the House of the Devil. He said, allegedly, that the studio cut up Cabin Fever, changed the direction or whatever.
Made a stupid cartoon intro.
That might be what they did. I don't know. You know, when something like that happens, you never really know how much, you know, what edits the studio made or whatever, especially with somebody like Ty West. You have an internal tendency to just go, well, then all the good stuff must have been Ty West, and all the dumb stuff was the evil studio. So now we're even more confused. But it turns out he made other films. So there's still hope for us figuring this out or adding to the confusion. Aside from being the director, writer, and editor, oh God, we love Ty West already, of this film, he performed the same jobs on The Roost in 2005 and on Triggerman in 2007. So now we're taking this movie, The Innkeepers, and basically we're saying, here is the most bullshit premise ever of all time. This is, man, you want to make a joke about just crappy, terrible horror films. Fucking soulless, creativity deprived horror films. it's these hotel films.
Well, I mean, it's a watered down version of The Shining with no creative imagination or twist.
That's exactly what it is.
There's ghosts in a hotel because who knows who stayed there over the years.
Yeah.
And The Shining goes, and then X and X and Y and Y, and here's why these people are dealing with it. The Innkeepers goes, and people are looking for them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, any movie that starts with the room number or the haunting of whatever hotel.
State, country, or hotel, yeah.
God, it's just the hotel one specifically, because it's always the same fucking thing.
Sure.
Somebody died in this room, and now some guy, and then writer, stays. Right, that's what it is.
And then you find their body, and you think, okay, now their spirit's at rest, but now the spirit's just even angrier.
Yeah, it's mad.
And there's no reason.
That spirit's pissed.
And then you end up having to join the spirit in death beside you in time. I was looking forward to joining you, finally.
What? Stop.
Spirit.
Stop it. Yes, it did. So we take this bullshit premise and we say, how will Ty West, this seems like an experiment you and I set up, take worst premise ever and one of most promising directors we can possibly think of but don't understand, and throw him at that premise and see what happens.
And you said this to me a while ago, and this is something that I just want to make sure that we put on the show. When it comes to pairing things up, you and I are the best two people in the United States.
It's probably one of the only talents we have.
If there's a global United Nations of pairing things up, we would be the United States delegates to that kind of
because we don't know the other films.
Right. In a world where we can look at two lists, two columns, and look at premise and then a list of directors, we could come up with a great film out of every premise.
Yeah. If a team of people does the work for column A and another team does the work for column B,
we can put those teams together.
We would
in the
be
most
awesome at just
way.
Pointing at two of them and making something interesting that no one would want to pay for. And that thing is the Innkeepers, I think. So the way we start this is using the world's cheapest scare shot. Right away, Ty West is already just trying to throw more question marks into things. I want to know from you. We're showing the audience one of those stupid YouTube videos.
Sure.
It's just a scary chair and ghost face, and it is the world's cheapest scare shot.
Yeah.
So does showing somebody in a movie, showing someone else the world's cheapest scare shot, and then by proxy showing the audience, does that allow you to get away with that?
I think what it does is it sets the premise for the reality of the film. The world of the film, which is that these people are not devoid of the idea that ghost hunting, capital G, capital H, is true and stupid.
Yeah.
And by true, I mean happens, not legitimate.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a jibe that they're not completely devoid of pop culture. They're aware of where the paranormal lives in society.
Sure. They know what they're talking about.
It's mostly a gimmick. It's mostly a device for scaring the shit out of people, getting a cheap thrill. And I mean, he says it right in the beginning. Luke says it in the beginning. It sells right then. I can't tell if this movie is set in the 90s because of all the weird angles and the fact that it looks like Erie, Indiana.
Well, and the way the camera quickly moves in on shots.
It's perfect.
It does have a lot of those relics of the 90s. This is something you were pointing out to me before, is that, and maybe one of the things that make us really interested in Ty West. Is that he kind of grew up when we grew up.
Right. Well, we kind of hail all these directors like Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino and, Rob Zombie, these directors that we talk about all the time.
They got 10 or 20 years on us.
And these are all directors that are making 70s films in the 2Ks.
Sure.
Ty West is probably the first director that we've really been able to latch onto because he's doing horror in an interesting way and he's making these solid, innovative, well-crafted films.
Sure.
But he's our age. I mean, the reason we're watching The Innkeepers and being able to go, this is so 90s, is because he grew up watching the same movies we grew up watching. His horror background is the same ones that we saw. I mean, he's probably seen The Dentist, and he saw the Sunday afternoon presentation of Critters 2.
Yeah, right.
He saw Gremlins 2 before Gremlins because Gremlins 2 was the one that they had rights to on WGN.
Sure.
And that's...
Yeah, I think he's in his late 20s when he made this or something. 30 years old. So, in the films previous to this, I mean, he grew up in the 80s. He experienced a lot of the films of the 90s. This film, whether it's intentional or not, this is our first time, both of us, seeing this. So we'll comb back through it. But even if this isn't set in the 90s, it is undeniable using the mechanics of 90s scary,
Well, and that's the thing
Friday night movie films.
Is the 90s film aesthetic for horror is so conducive to the cheesy ghost
it is
plot.
Yeah.
I mean, the angles are uncomfortable.
Sure.
It's always a little goofy, but it's just enough levity for you to be floored when something scary happens.
Sure.
You drop.
Yeah.
And I mean,
the camera move-ins are easy for me because you can see, it's somebody zooming in on a camera thing, but the angles are weird. These aren't, so we're not talking just Dutch angles. These aren't just tilt your camera 45 degrees. Why do these look so askew?
I think that the camera's pitched and rotated a little. I mean, it looks like it's pushed forward and down and to the right.
Sure, yeah.
And then
so
twisted.
Like the garage scene is one of those. Or the Case of the Mondays where, I mean, that one it's just slightly skew.
Right. I always think back to, with the zoom specifically, but the Goosebumps TV show.
Oh, totally that kind of stuff.
Remember Say Cheese and Die? The first time they look at the Polaroid, and it's skeletons.
No, not at all.
And the camera just zooms in on the reaction because it's skeletons.
Go. Right.
And
but I can imagine that moment perfectly, having never even seen it.
Right.
Because of how distinctive those, and you can feel the score swell in the background to also tell you that this is a big moment.
Sure.
The score is just as fucking goofy in this movie. The score might be, half of why the movie's kind of funny is that score.
Speaking of the comedy in the film, and this is what I think is one of the most ingenious portions of the film, is that the comedy is this really poignant tool that the film uses, not as relief, which is a whole other thing, but it's this kind of technique that the writing has used to give the characters humanity.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that is always absent, especially from horror films, is they give you the goofy stoner character, the guy with the hat who everybody loves, and oh my god, that guy's hilarious. The rest of the characters are always flat, and they die first.
Sure.
This movie goes and says these characters are human beings. They miss jokes. Sometimes they make hilarious jokes. Sometimes solely the way they react to a situation inspires humor. And this goes back to the thing I was talking about with the expositional gimmick. When Luke says, "Why are you so surprised that I talk to the customers?"
You and I are surprised by that too.
Right.
I'm way surprised by that.
Explain the background of characters, just flat out. One character goes, "Here's their backstory."
Yeah.
And then you go, "How do you know that?" He's like, "I work at the hotel."
Yeah, I talk to these people. Come on. Well, especially being a quiet hotel in its final
2 people
days.
live there.
Yeah, you work at that front desk and you talk to one other person all day. So when another individual comes in, you'll put up with their whole backstory.
Sure.
Claire might not when she goes to the coffee place and the chick wants to tell her everything. She doesn't give a fuck.
Well, and that's just a sign of Claire's character. That's a sign that
that's not who she is.
She's a shoot first, ask questions later, and she'll get wrapped up in herself before she gets wrapped up in the actual the whole world.
Yeah. When we have a small cast like this, and that's something we saw in The House of the Devil as well, and we have a couple more peripheral kind of characters who come in and out in this movie that I like a lot. But I do think that Claire and Luke both, but Luke is really interesting in kind of setting up that skeptical mindset.
Yeah.
Because you were talking earlier about they're aware of ghost hunters.
Sure.
This is a world where we have ghost hunters. The characters know about ghost hunters.
They know that it's a lucrative business even.
They have the Evil Inside Pentium notebook.
And a solid GeoCities website complete with a counter.
The spooky website is so fucking accurate. So this is another thing I know we've mentioned at some point on the show is that Chicago and our giant cemetery and all that, we have a huge ghost hunter kind of industry.
Well, it's because it's haunted as hell.
No,
we just got our first ghost tour. Did you know that?
What are you talking about?
There's Chicago bus ghost tours now. Like
see,
New Orleans style.
I was mentioning this to you a while ago. We've had that a while.
Really?
They're just not as popular as the Chicago chocolate tour.
I've started seeing the buses drive by.
Yeah, those have existed a while because we have. Well, who knows why they exist? Because it makes money, right? I mean, that's why it exists.
John Dillinger died in Lincoln Park next to the Biograph Theater.
Oh, you mean there's famous people that were in Chicago at their time of death?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that surprises me.
Ghosts get trapped where they die. This film proves it.
But the spooky fucking website, if you've ever been on these, they look just like them. This is clearly a thing where they went to these websites and found the funniest parts of them. And
after Chinese Pancakers XXX.
Oh my God. What was it? Tit Punch or something?
Tit Punch.
Is one of his history of porn websites is, oh man, it's one of those TiVo kind of moments.
Yeah.
So, it's got the bad video on it and the broken image icon, the orbs. I love that.
Yeah.
Anytime you start talking about ghost photos, you have to talk about orbs, which is things
Lens
that
flare.
are shiny in your, basically lens flare.
It's lens flare.
Things that are shiny in your shitty camera, where maybe it's got a little bit of grease on the lens.
Or some dust that's out of focus.
It skirts mockery, but it's also just accurate to what these characters are about. And you kind of have this question right away. Well, does Luke buy this? Is this you're getting to know Luke, so you don't know if that's his demeanor or if he just thinks this is all fucking nonsense.
Right. Well, and you kind of pick up early on that he's into Claire, and you're wondering whether or not this is something he's pursuing out of his own interest or because he knows that it's something that will keep Claire around.
Well, and eventually you have the moment where he says, oh yeah, it's all bullshit. It's hocus pocus, I think he calls it. You kind of find that he's setting up his backstory like he's a jaded ghost hunter. That, when he first started getting into all this stuff, blah, 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 and then he found that, you know what, your little stupid meter thing goes up and it means nothing.
Right.
Which doesn't happen often enough to ghost hunters.
Sure.
They move on to another form of pseudoscience.
You mean like with a glass diamond pendulum?
Are you calling acting a pseudoscience? Is that what you just did there?
I'm maybe a little.
No, but I mean, you're right. That's exactly what they go to. They go from crystals to chi to orbs.
Well, I mean, basically...
I'm sorry, I believe the path was indigo children to vaccines cause autism to oxygen TV show.
I just think that a lot of people, when it comes to pseudoscience, just have to move deeper into it.
Right.
Because the deeper you go, the harder it is. I mean, not really. You and I both know that it's not, but the harder it becomes to disprove when you use something like chi.
Yeah.
You say the word chi. You say
it's so vague
you say
and generic.
chakra.
What does it even mean?
To find a way to disprove the alignment of one's chakra is so much more convoluted than to disprove the existence of a ghost.
Sure.
I mean, to disprove the existence of a ghost, you point
tangible
at anything and go, ain't no ghost.
Right. Well, if you move away from a falsifiable hypothesis, then no one can falsify your hypothesis.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? But he later admits to making this stuff up, too. So it does seem more like it might be a vague interest of his.
Right.
And something he finds that, two people work together, they look for common ground.
Right.
He found some common ground with Claire and he dove into it.
I feel like at the end of the film, before the very last second when the door slams, you're sitting there and the film is exactly even 50-50, no such thing as ghosts, probably such thing as ghosts.
Oh, you know what?
Probably such thing as paranormal, okay? Spirits.
I'm completely buying it before that's... I don't know why,
but
just because I think
Let me explain a little bit.
Sure.
So we have three characters in the film, and a mother and a son.
Yeah.
The mother and the son, I'm going to write off, and also the old man who kills himself. Neither of them play into the actual existence of the paranormal.
Okay.
And we have Luke, we have Claire, and we have Lee.
Yeah.
Luke is hardline, no such thing as spirits, ghosts, or the paranormal. By the end of the film, he is definitively off the boat.
He's the skeptic character, but not in the most straightforward sense. It's a unique take on that character because the way he came to his skepticism isn't the sort of, hard brick wall background that we would anticipate from a cookie cutter skeptic character.
Yeah, it's almost by failed practice.
Yeah, that's precisely what it is. But you have to remember, these characters are not necessarily from our world.
Right.
They may be, and this is where I think you're going with this, they may be from a world where spirits exist.
Sure.
So he's definitely our skeptic champion here.
So let's put him on the 0 spiritual end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And then Lee will be at the 100 end of the paranormal
We're setting
spectrum.
up another line graph. This is good.
She's the one that, has the explanation for why she can see what she sees and how she can communicate the way she communicates.
Right.
And she's part of the community.
Sure.
And she's been involved and she's had these experiences.
She goes to conferences, man. It's the opposite of the amazing meeting. That's what's happening here.
She is 100% convinced of the paranormal.
Yeah.
As if it is the most common sense assertion. Okay. So at this point, we're breaking even. We have 1 at 0 and 1 at 100. And then there's Claire, who believes there is the paranormal, but refuses to accept it without contact.
Sure.
She's searching for the evidence to disprove or prove either of the other two characters correctly.
She wants to see it. She wants to experience it.
And we get this moment toward the end, the scene right before the blackout, where she gets essentially attacked by this ghost. And at that moment, I'm hoping the film doesn't end, because the film is basically saying, turns out there are ghosts. Surprise.
Well, not ghosts, spirits.
Sorry.
Come on here. That's kind of a weird take on that too, right?
Yeah.
There is no end, no beginning.
Right.
So it's sort of secular ghosts, which is a weird idea. Sometimes you talk to people, they claim to be atheists, they still believe in ghosts.
Sure.
We've had friends like that, right? Kind of a strange partitioning of ideas in your head. But this is a theory on spirits that doesn't necessitate afterlife.
Right. And by the end of the film, when you get attacked and killed by a ghost, the film is definitively saying this is a world of ghosts.
Sure.
But then you get that epilogue where they point out that Claire died because she didn't have her inhaler.
Right.
And it was too dark. And we've been seeing this inhaler the whole time, and they totally didn't hamster it the way that I was expecting them to.
Oh, yeah,
it just happened that time she didn't have the inhaler.
Sure.
And they had showed you that she needed an inhaler, but not the inhaler was the crux and the climax. It just happened to be the rationale. So she'd gotten worked up and died from the inhaler. And then I start questioning, well, she's been so wanting. You know, her idol believes in this.
Sure.
Lee is one of her favorite actors. She wants to be close to her and have these same. So then I start thinking she's the only one who's seen anything.
Right.
And maybe it's just been one of those tricks of the brain, and she's alone by herself in this hotel, and she wants to believe it so badly that all this rationale happens. And so then with the inhaler, I go, there never were spirits.
Right.
And then we have Lee in the room, which is maybe contacting Claire, you know, maybe channeling Claire.
Okay, sure.
But then she just walks out and you never see anything.
Right.
And
she has that end scene where there's kind of, again, the house of the devil, awkward tension.
Exactly.
It does go back to a lot of those 60s and 70s kind of things that are unspoken sort of moments.
And then,
which is great juxtaposed against what are essentially crystal, Ouija board kind of
absolutely.
I mean, that's what that thing is, right? It's a Ouija board.
Yeah. And so at that moment, I'm just sitting there kind of angry, because I feel like the film has gotten to the point where it's not going to make a decision.
Sure.
And
you could read into things either way.
Right.
When Lee's talking about a great tragedy in the hotel, she's probably just talking about their website.
Sure.
Which is the greatest tragedy that ever happened in the hotel, right?
I mean, it's got to be.
Sorry, what?
Then we creep back into the room.
Oh, right.
And we sit staring at it, and I'm wondering if they're going to do the QuickTime video. But I think it's an illusion.
It would have been
the
really
QuickTime
funny
video
if they did the...
And the door slams. And that is, to me, that is the film saying Claire's spirit is in the hotel. Spirits are real.
Yes, probably.
Well, exactly. That's what I said. I think it tips the scales 51-49 in favor of the paranormal.
Sure.
Which is just enough of a definitive stance for me to be on board with the film not pulling a bullshit you decide ending.
It tips it back in fun ghost movie.
Right, but
I'm just making a fun ghost movie.
What it doesn't do is it doesn't piss me off by being White Noise 2. It
still manages to be a film, to have this kind of craft to it that we expect from Ty West. Mm-hmm. To be treated with, subtlety, I guess is the wrong word for fun ghost movie.
Well, but I mean, it is the thing that I love about Ty West with House of the Devil and with Cabin Fever and now with The Innkeepers is that he takes classically unsubtle subjects and proves that with a little touch of nuance and subtlety, the movies don't have to suck. And they don't have to be campy. And they can make a statement about something like ghosts or, the subject matter in House of the Devil or the subject matter in Cabin Fever. They can take something that we've seen time and time again and we know, that happens, oh my god, and instead go, here's a way of looking at the human, just the human, it
gives humanity to the film. I think
it's the human experience. That's the phrase I'm looking for. Here's a way of looking at the human experience through the lens of those who believe in the paranormal or of those who are confronted with this type of situation, because without actually confronting them with a situation like a haunted hotel, we don't get that aspect, that facet of the human experience. And it's so quickly lost when you're trying to make a hilarious, crazy, scary horror film.
It's what makes us sound like dicks when we come on here and go, haha, these people believe that, fuck those people. This is a movie about how endearing those people might be.
It's not 13 Ghosts.
Right. Well, and it's a lot of it comes down to, the tone. It's still a movie that it doesn't just take this premise and slap down all the other movies that have done this.
No.
Because so easily it could go, oh, ghost movies are bullshit, and now I'm going to show you why by making the super ultimate best ghost movie ever. Instead, it has just enough of those elements to almost kind of pull that back up as, hey, there's potential to this. You know, you think about something like after she sees the scary piano, right? And she brings Luke in the room, and now Luke is mocking the scary piano.
Right.
And in a moment where we all think that Luke's going to see a ghost, and that's where the movie's going, instead, it pans back to Claire, who's also having fun with the scene. Right. Now these two are kind of mocking the genre, but kind of being a part of the genre at the same time.
That doesn't break the ghost film formula. It adheres almost entirely to your standard ghost film formula. It just shows that it's not the formula that's broken.
Right, yeah. Well, you can still do a lot of amazing things with it. I mean, the garage scene says a lot about the tone too, that beginning one. But you're making a film that, as a director, is as tense as House of the Devil gets in some of the moments from The Innkeepers, but is also still this light and this fun. It has these, these different choices it makes that, like you say, let it fall easily into this genre, but do something different with it. Stuff like the places it chooses to scare you, or what it does with those scares. You know, one of the most interesting choices, I think, of the whole thing is when they go down to the basement. Oh my God, the spirit, right? So they're listening to the audio tapes or whatever, and Luke's freaking the fuck out. You can see that visibly. He's shaking, and they build up all of this tension to the scare moment, which happens in every fucking horror movie. And when Claire says, oh my God, the thing, it's right behind you, at that point, they have now they've milked the scene long enough, they've earned Panda Luke, show the scary fucking thing behind him, run out of the room, everybody has fun, the audience screams, but they don't do it at all. Luke just bails. Right. Claire claims to see the thing. We don't know if she sees it or whatever.
And to me, I was just really sure she was trying to play an elaborate prank to get back for the QuickTime joke.
Well, and, he's running out of that scene, and we're given all that time to think, well, wait, hold on. Do we pan back? Do we show what happened in that scene? And, it makes the scene itself more impactful because the objective is accomplished. We learned a bit about Luke, and we saw his reaction, and then that's what provokes him to say, well, I made it all up. But it's so much more meaningful that we don't try and throw the scene away on, oh, I was just milking tension for a scare.
Sure, and going back to that gradient of paranormal that I mentioned earlier, by not showing it, it maintains that still only Claire has seen it.
Sure.
I feel like, and I know that it doesn't mean that, but I feel like if they were to show Luke with the spirit behind him, that's the same as showing Luke seeing the spirit. Yeah. I mean, if you put them in the frame and Luke is reacting to something that isn't really there, it's really the only way to go back and rectify it is to do a flashback where you show the same scene and there's nothing behind Luke and Claire imagine the whole thing. And that's, I mean, you don't do that.
Well, either way, I mean, even if you think you're reading into it too much, it's leaving the ambiguity there. And that's the intention.
And that's the power of it, for sure.
He's running away and the audience can think anything now. The first thing that comes to my mind is they didn't show the fucking whatever. Why is the movie making that? What a clever and just different, bizarre choice. Because you see the mechanic coming so far away. You just see milking it, and then no payoff. And it's a bizarre choice that then gives so much more weight to that scene. But it still has the scare payoffs. They're just in maybe unexpected areas. You have all this tension build, and then in moments like when Claire's at the top of the stairs, she's poking her flashlight down in the bottom. We haven't even built up the tension yet. We're doing the thing where we pan back and forth. And in one of the pans, we look back up at her and the scary fucking guy's behind her. You don't expect that at all because you're going, oh, we're still in the milking process. And halfway through, we haven't even built the tension yet. You weren't ready for that. You were waiting for them to pan back and forth 6 or 7 more times. Can we watch more Ty West things? I don't care if they're terrible.
I don't know if we can find them.
I'm going to look for them and we're going to watch them. I am in love with Ty West. We have different movies we're going to do on the show next time. Check out the upper right-hand corner of our website, which is doublefeatureshow.com, and it'll tell you what the movies are, in case we don't. But we will. Unlike The Innkeepers, we are a very predictable program that adheres to a format. email us about that format, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com, and then that thing that you do at the end.
Next time we're moving into, this is one of my most excited pairs so far this year.
Oh, good.
We're doing a sci-fi double feature about blowing up celestial bodies.
Great.
We're doing Dark Star, John Carpenter's first film, and Sunshine, which is directed by Slumdog Millionaire, Danny Boyle.
Said celestial bodies, and I thought Barbarella. Is that wrong of me?
No, I think...
You actually meant celestial bodies. You didn't mean... You weren't
Watch more fucking film?
Fine. Bye.
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and I'm here with Michael, right across from the spooky, what is this, Graceland Cemetery? Is that what's over here?
Graceland? Probably not Graceland.
No, I think that's what it's called. I'm not even kidding. I don't know. We record across from a giant cemetery. It's the big one, right?
It's the big one. Yeah.
The big,
like 12
spooky
city block.
Yeah, right.
The one where you go on Google Maps and you say, "Oh yeah, they have Grant Park and Millennium Park. Oh, what's that park? Oh, that's just dead people underground."
Yep. So this is where we bury all the people that don't make it out of Chicago. You're listening to Double Feature, and we have a show about, well, there's some dying on the show today. What movies are we doing?
We're doing Rogue and the Innkeepers.
Someone dies in one of the films. You know, by by last year's year-end finale episode, if anyone made it all the way through that train wreck, you would probably have considered that a spoiler just now.
Yeah, well,
you
I
were
would
spoiling films for
you
people.
You just spoiled a film by saying somebody dies in one of the films.
You can use chapters to skip this chapter. There's some chapters in one of the films too, and we're going to spoil which film has chapters in it. Use the chapters in our show to skip the spoiler about those chapters.
Okay. Rogue is not a film necessarily conducive to a graveyard. It's more conducive to an Australian outback island in a river canyon. Well, but we don't record next to one of those.
No, we don't have any of that here. I don't think we have one of those words here. What was that? Outback
Australian
island,
outback island in a river canyon.
I would have spent an hour and 20 minutes trying to figure out where I know
calling
him
your
from.
friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen Rogue? What was that guy in?
Well, the conversation would have gone, have you seen Rogue? No. Okay, well, he's that one guy. He has that kind of look on his... He's in all those movies,
got a
or maybe
longish face?
TV or something.
Right, but what is he from?
Alias is the thing. Well, this is something about... You and I mention TV every once in a while that we don't watch. Speaking of Splat Pack, Adam Green has a show.
Also, Rob Zombie.
Apparently Rob Zombie, too. Just Google their shows. Fantastic.
Adam Green,
TV, yeah. So,
not Splat Pack, by the way.
Should be Splat Pack. I watched all of Alias. It's 5 or 6 seasons or something. So hundreds of hours watching Alias. And I forgot that that's what he's from. That's about how much TV goes in and out of my life. But one of the main characters in Alias.
Sure.
And has done, other film work, too.
Alias being a J.J. Abrams, so we're allowed to watch that TV show.
Yeah.
And then, so you mentioned Rhoda Mitchell, who plays Kate, and she was on our show as the same character twice in the same film before on year one. Melinda and Melinda is the point I'm trying to make.
Yes. Where I believe we really talked her up on that that episode, too.
She played Melinda in Melinda and Melinda.
Thank you for that.
And then finally we have the slaughterhouse star power of Sam Worthington.
Yeah, what? That's a career that could have gone much differently.
Yeah. So Sam Worthington plays this hillbilly backwoods Bodie poacher man.
What are you talking about? This is nuts. It's true. I mean, you're right.
Okay, I was like, am I wrong?
No, it's just a weird fucking role for him. It really is. Bizarre.
Well, and I think the weirdest part is how quickly he gets et.
The way they lead into the violence in this film is use the template blank as the slasher. It just named the thing that appears the most in the movie.
So Rogue is about, I guess the title refers to the fact that it's a rogue crocodile. It's gone crazy.
Sure.
I mean, it's not behaving in the way that they said it would.
Yeah.
Or rather, they expected it to.
Sure.
It's hyper-territorial. Although, as the film goes on, they just kind of explain how it's behavioral.
Right.
Why it's hunting them, and it's marked us as a food source, stuff like that. But it's massive, and possibly the most notable thing in the sense of Double Feature, the podcast. This is a podcast.
Yeah, this is a podcast. You got
is that it's a giant CG crocodile, and it doesn't make me angry.
Yeah, both of those are true. Impressive CG crocodile.
Yeah,
I mean, my
really
standards
is.
for CG, I always try to keep them ridiculously low. But fine job.
That's
on
some
the crocodile.
optimistic pessimism you've got going on there.
I was wondering how long it would take you to invoke your new favorite idea ever.
But the other thing about the phrase giant crocodile as the slasher is that...
Oh, what does our show come to?
is that saying... So this as a Splat Pack film is also notable because of one, who dies, and because of how few of them die.
Sam Worthington is in this movie.
Avatar's Sam Worthington.
Well, okay,
Or
so
Clash of the Titans, Sam Worthington.
So really quick before Worthington's star power just massacres everybody else in this movie.
So you're saying Sam Worthington's star power as the slasher now?
Yeah, that's exactly what that is. Kate's fantastic, and I'm gonna be all sad about her all over the show. But also Michael Vartan is in this movie. And I'm so glad we live in an era where we have IMDb.
Yeah.
Because we actually had to stop the movie and figure out what he was from. Otherwise, it would have, in a world before IMDb.
That, to me, just means violent movie. Yeah. Love it.
By this film.
Yeah.
I talked about this at some point, I think, on the show.
Probably
that I had
back with maybe Inside?
Dimension Extreme?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was iTunes at some point in the last year or so. It might have been longer now. They put movies in the cloud, which I got really excited about because I love the idea that I don't have to be responsible for keeping all of my movies, that they can just sit on a server somewhere and I can go to anyone's house and download a film I own.
Sure.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So at the time, only certain labels, production company, whatever.
Sure, studios.
Movie houses. Yeah, studios, thank you.
DVD banks.
Were putting their movies in the cloud. And so I was kind of going through the 200 or whatever films that I have and figuring out which studios made which films. And Dimension makes 85% of my films or something. But Dimension Extreme makes a lot of those films too, which is just branding, right?
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah. And Rogue is weird as a Splat Pack film because we've covered Bousman with Saw. And we've covered Rob Zombie and Neil Marshall.
Well, we've covered all these guys at least a little bit.
Sure. Right? It's always people killing people.
Yeah, right.
Always. People killing people.
Yeah.
And here we have a giant, steam train sized crocodile, a massive gecko.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
And
18-wheeler size, would
that's
you
what
say?
I kept saying it was the size of an 18-wheeler.
It's huge, Michael. So tell me about the crocodile as the slasher then.
So I'm glad that's the way you worded it because that's something I want to talk about.
On this show, I can anything as the slasher is basically my MO. That's my elevator pitch for any film. Sure. I used to be bad at elevator pitches. Then I realized I can use a canyon. We have a river.
We do have a river.
We have a river.
Forks.
Yeah, but you can't bury people in the river the way you can just leave them in the swamp. That's an okay burial, to just leave someone in a swamp or a crocodile cave. Also, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. Why don't you just go ahead and type up an email that says you called them alligators instead of crocodiles? Yeah. Because I'm sure that's going to happen at some point. So might as well get that ready now.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that my incessant need to be a little bit loquacious and verbose when I'm speaking.
Ooh, look at you.
Is going to cause me to say alligator just because of how often I've said and heard crocodile throughout this show.
Some variation.
And I don't want to say reptile or lizard or newt or giant gecko.
I, on the other hand, am going to only say giant gecko for the remainder of this, just of this chapter. When we talk about the crocodiles in the Innkeepers, I'll go back to Crocodile.
So Rogue is directed by Greg McLean.
Yeah.
Who we covered on the show with John Jarrett's other film.
Yeah. Jarrett's other, that's an interesting way to look at that, but sure.
Which is Wolf Creek. And he's probably the only director that I can director whose films make it in America. I'm sure there are Australian directors that make films about and in Australia that we never see.
You're baiting people again, man. They're going to start telling us to watch that Mel Gibson movie with all the sand.
Braveheart?
I don't know what to do with you sometimes. I just don't know what to do with you.
Similar to Neil Marshall. they hit in the US, at least with the horror community. And maybe it's because they're horror films. The US has a ridiculous horror community.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah,
all of us horror fans are weird, and we
They're
latch
insane,
on.
I think is what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, we latch on. I mean, I think one of the greatest things that Dimension Film ever did was create Dimension Extreme, just exclusively because posters and DVD covers and the covers that go on iTunes
Sure.
have that red gash across the top.
Sure.